across the land, joepags.com, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, email, plus Newsmax TV. It's the Joe Pags Show. Glad to have you along for the ride. Really glad to have back the president of Judicial Watch. It is Tom Fitton. Tom, how are you?
Hey, Joe. Thanks for having me. Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year to you as well. I appreciate you taking the time this early in the new year, but we just talked about this a minute ago. I really did try to get away from social media and the news cycle for about a minute, and you said something that was funny yet true. Nothing's changed. The same garbage is going on, right?
Well, in fact, everything's been frozen on impeachment. Reportedly, there's been no discussions in the Senate as to what to do, so they'll get back to work on that when they come back into town next week. But the coup continues to drag on by Nancy Pelosi. She was obviously targeting the president with this illicit impeachment. Now she's playing games with the articles of impeachment by withholding them in order to overthrow the Senate. So the coup's expanded. But nothing's happened beyond the current or most recent abuses by Hillary, not President Pelosi, not Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, she wants to be President Pelosi. Exactly right. But you're right. I mean, they're all mixed in that coup, so it's hard to sort of keep the players separate. From judicialwatch.org, it is Tom Fitton. So let's just do a quick primer on how we got here. The Intel Committee should never have had this, ever. That's not who does this. The Judiciary Committee does if there's going to be impeachment. There was no independent counsel like Kenneth Starr who was named to research and investigate these charges that they brought up. The charges are abuse of power, which he hasn't done. Now, the argument was made he abused his power because he's from America, which is more powerful than Ukraine. So therein, just having a phone call was an abuse of power. And also obstruction of Congress, which doesn't exist. There is no such thing as obstruction of Congress. But the obstruction of Congress, as I understand it, is that the president dared go to the judicial branch to call a check and balance on what the legislative branch was trying to do. That somehow is obstruction of Congress. If he doesn't send somebody to testify, it's obstruction. If he picks his nose, it's obstruction. They really have nothing, Tom, and they know they have nothing. So is this the only real game that Pelosi can play, holding on to the articles? If she doesn't send them over, then the Senate can't do anything anyway. She has no leverage. She can't make Mitch McConnell do anything.
Well, they're hoping to allow this delay to generate more information to supposedly provide a basis to remove him from office. And it shows you how fraudulent the impeachment charade was. As you point out, there is no good faith basis for impeachment. This is an abuse of power by Nancy Pelosi. And to the degree the Senate does anything, they shouldn't buy into this desire by them to use the Senate to further abuse and harass the president. They should focus on shutting it down. It's a coup. It should be treated as such. And to the degree the Senate does anything in terms of calling witnesses, they should be investigating Adam Schiff's prosecutorial abuse, both his illicit communication seemingly with the whistleblower / leaker, and his obtaining and publishing the phone records, again, in seeming violation of the law and any due process of the president's attorneys and other innocent Americans.
Yeah, it is Judicial Watch's Tom Fitton. Always great information. Go check out their website, judicialwatch.org. Go follow them on Twitter, both Judicial Watch and Tom individually, because the investigations and the research and the reporting is amazing. So as we look at this, there's a catch-22 in my mind, and you're going to help me to make sense out of it, I think, because you know a lot more than I do on this.
I hope so.
So you've got one case where you're right. Mitch McConnell gets it and says, screw you, it's frivolous, it's out of here. How dare you? I'm going to throw it out in contempt of even an attempt to follow proper procedure constitutionally. This is garbage, how dare you? That can be done in the first day. Or you do 6 or 8 weeks and you call in Adam Schiff, you call in Al Green from Houston, who just admitted that they started the impeachment process while Trump was running for president, much less not over some Ukrainian call. And you call in Hillary Clinton, and you call in Schiff, and you call in Pelosi herself, who is the leader of this coup, and you expose everything. So what do you do? Because you can do both of those things, and both of them will get you to an end. If you do the first thing, then Pelosi says, see, they were afraid that he would be convicted, so they threw it out. This isn't due process. We're going to keep on charging him. What do you do? Those are the choices.
Well, on the other hand, you would further abuse the presidency by forcing him to deal with this trial for 6 to 8 weeks.
Right.
And you don't know what these individuals are going to say. I just don't think they should get the benefit of their corruption, which is a Senate trial, which would be the benefit of their corruption. I wouldn't dispute your analysis in terms of the public interest in hearing from the Coup cabal plotters and holding them accountable. And I think one kind of intermediate solution is a preliminary hearing about the prosecutorial misconduct. You know, one of the problems with this whole impeachment sham is that the president has never been allowed to be put on a defense.
Right.
Either by calling in witnesses or even defending himself in the course of the impeachment proceedings, because they've made it impossible for them to do that.
Right.
And certainly in the least, the Senate ought to do that. The trouble with Senate trial, or the trouble with trials, and I tell you this as a non-lawyer, is you don't know what's going to happen once they begin. And you don't want a runaway jury either. So I think there's a good reason not to have witnesses on one side versus the other, but there is a solution in terms of skinning the cat, which is to have this preliminary effort to investigate the prosecutorial misconduct and hold Schiff accountable for abusing the process.
Is there a mechanism in place to do that, though, if you don't have the trial? Can a Senate committee like the Senate Judiciary Committee tomorrow call Adam Schiff to come and testify and undress him there in front of the public? Can you do that?
Sure. They can change the rules or authorize under the Senate trial rules they already have in place this preliminary inquiry, this preliminary hearing. You know, for prosecutor committed misconduct in the court system, there would be a process for the court considering evidence in that regard, or a preliminary hearing in terms of ascertaining the nature of the evidence that they have against them. And maybe that's another opportunity to bring in some of these other witnesses without having a full-blown Senate trial.
What's interesting is you had Rashida Tlaib saying we're going to impeach the MF. You've got Al Green who has said now for years and has filed articles of impeachment many, many times and has failed, just saying we have to get rid of him or else he'll be reelected. AOC says we have to impeach him or he'll be reelected. And this thing has been going on for forever. That's why it is a coup. It is the cabal who is planning against him. But what's the real recourse other than subpoenaing them and putting them in front of the Senate? What recourse is there? Because if nothing happens now, Tom, you know what Pelosi's going to do. They're going to do another vote and then impeach him again and then bring the articles again. And this is a never-ending cycle, especially if he gets reelected, which I think he will. How do you stop them, I guess, is the question.
I hate to go back to my original plan, but you bring them in before the Senate to highlight their abuse of power. That's the accountability. If you don't want someone slinging sugar over your fence, you have to do something to make them stop.
Right.
There's got to be some accountability and pushback for doing that. And if there's no pushback, you're right. I think that's a possibility that we're already seeing elements of that where Pelosi is trying to perpetually impeach the president or keep him under perpetual impeachment by refusing to turn over the articles. On the other hand, McConnell could also just say, and the Senate could say as a body, we're not playing this game. These impeachment articles are fraudulent and a sham, and we're not going to give you any voice here. We're going to shut it down. There'll be no impeachment trial in an election year, kind of like the Merrick Garland issue. Yeah. And so, do whatever you want, but the Senate is not going to be hijacked by the coup cabal.
It is Tom Fitton, the president at Judicial Watch, judicialwatch.org. Go there right now. Go and follow him on Twitter. Follow Judicial Watch as well. Incredible work that you and your folks do. I had Ted Cruz on recently, and Cruz, made a joke out of it in the beginning of the interview, and he said, "What impeachment? I haven't seen any articles. Nothing's happened. Our job is to hold that trial and to get a result, either guilty or not guilty. But I have nothing to try, nothing to even read about, nothing to look at. I hear the House did something, but we have nothing." So can they, like you just said, preemptively, can Mitch McConnell say, listen, I heard in the news that you guys took a vote. I understand that there are articles of impeachment that were voted on and that by a bipartisan measure, they were voted down. A partisan measure, they were voted yes. You guys had more than the down votes. You haven't sent them over, though. Can he preemptively say, guess what, Nancy, you waited too long, we're not going to take them? Because there really is no time limit in the Constitution. What mechanism is there for him to say no? Does he have to wait for her to do something or not?
No. All the Constitution says is the Senate has the sole power to try impeached officials, and the House has the sole power to impeach them. And he can take notice of the fact, the Senate can take notice of the fact there's been an impeachment. They don't need to have this process in place. It's only rules-based. It's not based on the Constitution. So the Senate can take into account and take judicial notice of the fact he's been impeached and deal with it forthwith.
Have you ever, in your life as a lawyer or as this great investigator over Judicial Watch, have you ever seen where the prosecutor said, I'm not going to try the case because I'm afraid there won't be a fair trial? Isn't that usually what the defendant says? I don't think I can get a fair trial. Why is the prosecution that decided we're going to charge him, we got him, why are they the ones saying they can't get a fair trial? That's odd to me.
It is, and I'll just warn you, I'm not a lawyer.
Okay.
But obviously, in this case, it's not even. They're not even prosecutors.
You know a lot more than most.
By the way, make arguments to other politicians.
You know a lot more than most lawyers I know. So maybe I confused that because you got the information. But yeah, this isn't the way it works. I've been in news media for 20 years, 30 years. Wow, I can't believe it's been 30 years. And I was a television news anchor for a long time. I'm an award-winning journalist. I've never, ever covered a trial where the prosecution said, we just can't have a fair trial here until the jury tells us they'll be fair. I mean, or the defense tells us, no, it's always the guy who's being accused of something who has the right to due process and fairness. Where does she get off thinking that she has the right to even question that?
Well, prosecutors sometimes try to do that indirectly by choosing the venue in which to prosecute someone. Federal versus state venue, or picking the location where the trial is going to take place.
She has no choice there. The venue is the Senate.
Here she can't pick the venue.
Yeah.
Nancy Pelosi can't pick the venue, and this is like the Kavanaugh hearings.
Exactly.
Nothing the Republicans did in handling that situation was enough. Oh, they did the hearings, and then they wanted another round of hearings, and then they wanted an FBI investigation. All of that was never enough.
Right.
So McConnell is a smart guy politically. I don't always agree with his decision making, but tactically, I trust him to figure out how to knock back Pelosi. But we should offer these alternatives out there, so that there is a fair process, at least that allows the president to get his defense out there, either through legal argument and argument in the Senate, or through, as I say, this preliminary hearing, this mini trial of what Schiff did and the abuse of power by the House. I fear that if there's no accountability for what went on here, it's just going to keep on happening. And unless there's some downside to doing it, and there's no downside for the Democrats as far as I can tell to date. They spied on him criminally. No criminal investigate. No one's been prosecuted for that. Yeah. The president has been. There's been no other president that has been as victimized in a criminal way as this president. And now civil rights. Well, not now, but almost began before he became president. His civil rights have been violated time and time again, both by the executive branch and now by the congressional branch. And the question is the Senate going to buy into that abuse of power and that abuse of the president and the presidency? And, of course, our rights to make sure that we have the president in power, that we elected as the American people. Yeah. This isn't just about Trump voters and non-Trump and people who voted against Trump. They're telling voters, it doesn't matter what you do. It don't count. Because if we don't like the result, we're going to break every rule in the book to undo it.
It's crazy. Tom, incredible information, incredible work on this. Let's talk again very soon as this progresses, okay?
Thank you. Will do.
Tom Fitton, president of judicialwatch.org. Go and check out the website. Follow him and follow Judicial Watch. We're back after this in the Joe Pag Show. Stay here.